According to the rules set by the World Chess Federation, or FIDE, the rook can go straight to any square without crossing any other piece. Here, the squares where the rook can go are marked with a blue circle. If a player has more rooks than his opponent in the end of the game, then the opponent can be easily defeated. Today, we will learn this method. In this case, white has one more rook than black. The white player has to use the king and rook to move the black king to the edge of the board and then checkmate it, because the opponent's king cannot be checkmated in the middle of the board using the king and rook. To avoid complications, the method has been divided into 4 steps. In the first step, the opponent's king must be confined to one half of the board. After the rook checks h5, the king will either move up or down. If it moves up, it will be confined to this part, and if it moves down, the king will be confined to this part. In the second step, you have to move your king to the center of the board, that is, to any of these 4 squares. Now, the opponent's king can be trapped in that square using the rook. In this situation, the king is trapped in this area. Note again that in this situation, the king cannot be moved up, so we will move the rook. As a result, the king will move in any direction. The king can be moved up in the next move. This type of move is called a waiting move. Again, even if the situation is like this, the king cannot be placed in the center. In this situation, the rook will have to check e5. The king will be forced to move to the f file. Now, if you place the king in the center, the black king will be trapped in this square. If the king attacks the rook can be brought to the d5 square. If you move the king to the c4 square in the next move, the opponent's king will be trapped in this area. It is noted that in this step, the king could be trapped in the square where the king was. Third step. In this step, the opponent's king must be moved to the edge of the board. This is the most important situation. Note that the king's square cannot be reduced in any way in this move. So we will now make a waiting move using the king. The king can still move 3 squares. If the rook goes to the e4 square, the king's square can be reduced. And if the king goes to the g4 square, the king can be brought to the e4 square. Now, no matter which square the black king moves to, if the rook is moved to the f5 square, the black king's square will be reduced. By following the same method again, the king can be brought to the edge of the board. That is, first the waiting move, king e5. The king can move 3 squares. If king goes to the g3 or h3 square, the rook f4. The king will be trapped in this part. And if the h4 square, the king f4. In the next move, the king will go to the g3 square only, and the rook can be trapped at the edge of the board by moving the king to the g5 square. The same method can be followed again. Now, if the king moves to the g1 square, the king will be trapped at the edge of the board. King h2 moves again, king f2. The king has to move to the only square h1. Then, the rook h3 checkmates. Fourth step. In this step, the king has to be placed on the top king in such a way that it can control the squares above the opponent's king. First, the white king has to be placed on the g3 square, that is, on the black king. In this way, the opponent's king cannot come up from the edge. Now, if black has a move, the black king has to move to the h1 square. Then the rook f1 can be checkmates, and if white has a move, the rook f3 waiting move can be given. The black king has to be forced to come to the h1 square. The next move is the rook f1 checkmate. A little behind, now the king has to be forced to come to the h2 square. The white king has to be brought to the f2 square. Now the black king can go to 2 squares. If the black king goes to the h1 square, the rook h4 can be checkmates. And if it goes to the h3 square, the rook f4 waiting move. The black king has to come to the h2 square. Then the rook h4 checkmates. If the king is at the edge of the board, then on the first move, we can move the rook to the h7 square. This will put the king on the 8th rank. We can then move the king up and checkmate as before. Using 2 rooks is easier to give a checkmate. First, we need to consider how far the king is from the edge. If the king is on the edge, then on the first move, we will move any rook. In this case, the rook on h1 to h7. This will bind the king to the 8th rank. On the next move, we can move the other rook to a8 and checkmate. If the king is on e5, then on the first move, we can move the rook to h1. 4. As a result, the king will be bound to this part. Later, we can use the other rook to reduce the king's square in stages. Finally, the king will move to the edge of the board and checkmate can be given. If the king attacks the rook, then the rook will have to be moved to the other end and reduce the king's square in stages and finally checkmate. It should be remembered that even if the king has already gone down, we will still reduce the king's square in stages. Because if check is given in this situation, the king will come back up and it will take more time to checkmate. It should be noted that checkmate can be given in different ways. Only a simple method is described here. When a player plays many matches, he learns other techniques on his own. That's all for today. Stay tuned by subscribing to the channel to get the latest videos.